Chapter 19. As soon as they were done with their coffee, Doreen asked, "So what can you tell me about the case?" "Not much. Obviously it's a human foot and lower leg. No, we haven't confirmed if it's male or female. It's with the coroner right now. They'll run DNA. Do you have any other cases with missing lower legs and feet?" "We're searching through the cold case files. But nothing yet." "And what about solved cases?" He looked at her in surprise. Meaning, a case that was closed but where potentially not all of a body was recovered, or even where no body was recovered. He frowned. "I haven't gone looking into the closed cases. Generally, they aren't closed if we're still missing pieces." "But you have closed cases where there was no body?" "I know of some cases across Canada," he said cautiously. "But I can't recollect any here in town." She studied him for a long moment. "Might be worth another search. It's in progress. In the meantime, you can tell me what you found in my mother's journals." He had said it so calmly, so smoothly, that she didn't understand for a moment. And then she laughed. "I didn't find anything. That's the problem. She has 3 journals, and they'll take a little bit to go through." She sipped her coffee. "I need to know you will share any information you might have found. That way, I won't have to charge you with interfering in an ongoing investigation or taking photographs of the evidence." She shook her head. "That won't wash. I haven't interfered in any way. In fact, I've helped." She quickly moved to the next topic. "What about the creek bed?" He shook his head. "Nothing new. So far a lower leg and a foot less than half a mile from a severed hand." "Severed hand and forearm," he corrected. She nodded. "I hope they are from the same body. I think the foot was too small to be a man's. I understand Betty was small." Again, no way to know at this point. The coroner will make that decision, and if he can't, they'll bring an anthropologist from the coast. She frowned. "I guess each specialty is quite different, aren't they? Bodies with flesh for the coroner. Bodies without flesh for anthropologists? I'm not sure it's quite so clear-cut and simple, but yes." "How often do you bring in specialists from Vancouver?" "Considering Kelowna has a very low crime rate with less than 3 murders in a year, I would imagine not very often. I've been with the police force 17 years, and I can only think of a half-dozen cases where we've had to." She nodded. "So 1 every other year on average?" "It depends. We had several people hiking who never returned. They were declared missing several years later, but it's not like the case was closed. Then we had a particularly heavy thaw, a fast melt, and their bodies floated down in one of the creeks. They still had on their backpacks and hiking boots. But not a whole lot was left of the flesh. They had been frozen, so we needed outside help to determine how long those bodies had been there. The DNA confirmed who they were, but that had taken a lot longer than we'd like to see, in terms of notification." "I can understand that. But they probably had IDs on them." He nodded. "They did. But we didn't have anybody locally who understood the time it took to decompose under those severe mountain temperatures. I believe these hikers had been missing for a good 7 years." She winced. "Their poor families." "Exactly. So even if I cross a line a bit more to bring in a specialist, we're happy to do it for the families. If it gets us confirmed IDs and some kind of a timeline as to what went on, then that's a bonus." "Did you track where the creek flowed to find out where the hikers went missing from?" "No, in that case we had a massive snowmelt coming down. They could have come from halfway up the mountains. There was no way to know, and we don't have the resources to pinpoint something like that. This is all really fascinating. I wish I could have a career involved in that." He looked at her in surprise. You really like this stuff, don't you? She nodded. I do. But at my age, I can't say I want to go back to school and get a degree that will take 5, 6, or 7 years to complete, and then start a new career fresh when everybody will be looking at me, asking, why aren't you retiring? You're not that old. She shook her head. No, I'm not, but I feel like I am some days. He chuckled. We all do. He stood. I'm heading home. I'm tired, and I need to get some sleep. She rose, walking to the front door with him. Thank you again for the pizza. She meant it sincerely. I wasn't looking forward to a cold dinner. He nodded. I figured you wouldn't have learned how to use the stove yet. We both had a rough day. He turned and glanced at her. Are you okay tomorrow to finish the garden? Even solo? She winced. I told Millicent I would, didn't I? I was supposed to check if I could do the work this afternoon. It doesn't matter. I couldn't let you in anyway. The officers were taking soil samples and photographs and doing all kinds of crap in my mom's backyard. It went way longer than we expected. It's still not done. I told her that you weren't allowed back, so she understood. Doreen leaned against the doorjamb. Still, I shouldn't have forgotten. What did you do when you got home? She frowned and motioned toward her bedroom upstairs. I fell asleep. Or tried to. He chuckled. Good. Now you've eaten, so have a good evening, get some more sleep, and I'll meet you at the garden tomorrow morning. If I wasn't allowed today when the team wasn't finished, not even when you left, what if I'm not allowed back tomorrow? She said with a head shake. I don't want to disappoint your mother. How about I call you before 10 and let you know if everybody's finished? With that note, he lifted his hand in a wave and headed to his vehicle. As she stood there, she watched several neighbors and other people, suspiciously new faces, walking their dogs in a very slow motion around the cul-de-sac. She didn't recognize half of them. What were they all doing here? But, of course, the news would have already spread. She might have stayed inside, but no one else had.